The dust of the divided kingdom lay heavy upon the northern hills of Israel, a mantle of sorrow woven from the threads of forgotten covenant. Silence, not of peace, but of spiritual separation, clung to the air. Here, in the city once named Bethel, the house of God, a new shadow had fallen. King Jeroboam, in his fear of unity, had raised altars that stood in cold defiance of the sacred altar in Jerusalem. The smoke that rose from these forbidden stones was not a sweet aroma of worship, but a cloud of rebellion, a scent of copper and false gold mingling with the morning dew. The very stones of Bethel seemed to sigh under the weight of this newly established apostasy. The nation was adrift, steered by the ambition of a king who chose political expediency over the divine command. But the Eternal does not permit his word to be bound by the schemes of man, nor his silence to be mistaken for absence. From the south, from the territory of Judah, where the lamp of David still burned, an unheralded messenger began his solitary journey. He was known only by his mission, a man of God. His name is withheld from the sacred record, elevating his role beyond personality, making him a pure vessel of the command he carried. He walked with a specific, solitary instruction, one that defined his entire existence for that day. Deliver the word, refuse all hospitality, and return by a different path. It was a mandate of utter, uncompromising separation. His path led him toward the unauthorized altar, toward the king's proud, profane ceremony. He carried the severity of the prophetic word, the weight of the Kadosh God in his silent steps. The coming clash would be between the absolute clarity of a spoken decree and the tempting complexities of the world, a deep theological tension that would leave a man dead, yet confirm the eternal truth. This narrative unfolds from the chilling passage in the first book of Kings, chapter 13, detailing the mission and subsequent tragedy of the man of God sent from Judah to Bethel. His story is a profound, concentrated study in the nature of divine obedience. He was commanded to confront the idolatry of King Jeroboam, who had corrupted the worship of Israel by setting up a golden calf and an illegal altar in Bethel, 1 Kings 12:26-33. The divine mandate given to this unnamed prophet was threefold and absolute. Speak the prophecy of judgment against the altar. Refuse to eat bread or drink water in that place of defilement, and do not return by the way he came. 1 Kings 13:9. He performed the first act with flawless courage, but failed the second part through a subtle, tragic manipulation. His downfall was not rooted in the face of royal threat or open rebellion, but in yielding to the seduction of a false prophetic word from an older or yet compromised prophet of Bethel. The story documents the immediate and literal judgment upon this act of disobedience, establishing a stark theological truth. The word of the Eternal is singular, unyielding, and cannot be nullified by any subsequent, unauthorized claim of revelation. It is an account of the rigor of the word and the cost of breaking a pure and specific command. Chapter on the mission and the profaned altar, 1 Kings 13:1-6. The man of God emerged from the roads of Judah and stood before the burgeoning corruption of Bethel. The city air thrummed with the solemn sound of unauthorized ritual. King Jeroboam himself, robed in royal authority, stood beside his new stone altar, prepared to burn incense and solidify his political religious scheme. The king's presence lent a deceptive weight of sacredness to the profane act. The prophet did not look toward the throne, nor did he address the monarch. He directed his whole being toward the stone structure, the focal point of the nation's sin. His voice, resonant and clear, cut through the sounds of the ceremony, speaking directly to the mute stones. "O altar, altar, thus says the Eternal." The word transformed the inert object into a recipient of prophecy. The decree was one of utter, inescapable humiliation. He proclaimed that a future son of the house of David, named Josiah, would arise in time to come, not merely to destroy the altar, but to ritually defile it. This future king would sacrifice the priests of the high places upon it, burning human bones upon the surface, thus cleansing the apostasy with a judgment of fire. 1 Kings 13:2. The prophet then offered a sign, an immediate, undeniable seal upon the distant word. "Behold, the altar shall be torn apart, and the ashes that are upon it shall be poured out." The words themselves seemed to possess a physical force, a vibration that threatened the king's reality. Jeroboam, enraged by this public defiance and the prophesied ruin of his religious institution, stretched out his hand from the altar, commanding his guards to seize the speaker. In that moment of arrogant extension, a judgment swift and silent was rendered. The hand of the king, poised in command, withered instantly, paralyzed and rigid, unable to be drawn back to his side. It hung, a dead thing, a monument to defiance. Simultaneously, the earth beneath the altar seemed to shudder. The stone structure cracked with a sound like dry bone breaking. A visible fissure opened in its surface, and the ashes of the unauthorized sacrifice spilled onto the ground below, fulfilling the immediate sign before the very eyes of the king and his court. 1 Kings 13:5. The air grew thick with a sudden, overwhelming dread. In his terror and the agony of his withered arm, the king's pride dissolved into desperate pleading. He begged the man of God to intercede for him, to entreat the face of the Eternal, his God, for the restoration of his limb. The prophet, still maintaining the reverence of his commission, turned his focus toward heaven. He petitioned the Eternal, and the king's hand was miraculously restored to him, whole and functional. The prophetic authority had been demonstrated fully, judgment delivered, mercy shown, and the word confirmed in instant reality. Chapter 2. The Solemn Oath and the Refusal. 1 Kings 13:7-10. Humbled, relieved, and grasping for a moment of control, King Jeroboam attempted to recompense the prophet. He invited the man of God to his house for refreshment and a gift, an offer of royal hospitality meant to restore honor to the court and to the king himself. He offered bread and water, a simple gesture that in the Middle East symbolized alliance and welcome. But the prophet's mission was not merely to speak the word, it was to embody the separation demanded by the word. The command had been absolute, a cord of ritual and spiritual isolation. He must not partake of anything in that place of apostasy. I may not return with you, nor go in with you. Neither will I eat bread nor drink water with you in this place, he declared with unwavering conviction. He explained the strictness of the decree. The Eternal had spoken an explicit, personalized law. You shall not eat bread nor drink water there, nor return by the way you came. 1 Kings 13:9. The prophet's refusal was a direct act of worship, a declaration that the purity of the mandate superseded royal favor, earthly comfort, or personal desire. Even if the king were to offer him half his kingdom, the prophet proclaimed, the divine command could not be broken. This separation was the essence of his integrity. To eat would be to accept the spiritual contamination of the schismatic kingdom, to acknowledge the legitimacy of the very place he had been sent to condemn. His feet, therefore, could not trace the same path out that they had traced in. With the unshakable dignity of one who has successfully completed the heart of his mission, the man of God turned from the sight of the king and the corrupt city. He chose an alternate route, disappearing onto a different road, adhering to the letter of his sacred instruction. He walked away from Bethel, believing his obedience was complete, the purity of his service preserved. His departure was silent, a shadow moving across the landscape, leaving behind a king still entangled in his sin and an altar marked by divine judgment. Jordidi, Chapter 3. The Old Prophet's Stratagem. 1 Kings 13:11-19. A contrast to the rigor of the messenger from Judah resided in Bethel itself. This was the home of an old prophet, a man whose title remained, but whose spiritual clarity was obscured. He was a man of the region, residing in the very city that symbolized the spiritual compromise he was called to oppose. His sons came to him, recounting the events of the day with wonder, the strength of the prophecy, the instant miracle of the withered hand, the splitting of the altar, and the fierce, absolute refusal of the messenger to accept the king's hospitality. They described the very road the man of God had taken upon his swift and firm departure. A restless impulse stirred in the old prophet. The text does not reveal his motive. Was it jealousy of a clearer word, a desire for recognition, or a failure of spirit born of long compromise? Whatever the source, he ordered his donkey to be saddled and went in pursuit of the departing messenger. He found the man of God resting beneath a massive oak tree, taking a brief, human moment of repose after the tension of his confrontation. The old prophet approached with the familiarity of a fellow servant of the Eternal. He repeated the offer of food and drink, using the language of spiritual brotherhood. The man of God, though tired, repeated the exact words of his command. His refusal was unwavering, founded on the specific and detailed word given to him. He could not eat or drink in this place. The original mandate remained the unassailable truth. It was here that the stratagem was cast. The old prophet produced not a new command, but a lie cloaked in the highest authority. He claimed an angelic visitation, a secondary revelation that superseded the first. An angel spoke to me by the word of the Eternal, saying, "Bring him back with you to your house, that he may eat bread and drink water." 1 Kings 13:18. This was a classic temptation, a new word of ease and comfort offered by one who claimed prophetic legitimacy, directly contradicting a clear, established command. The man of God, perhaps weary from the road, perhaps tempted by the prospect of fellowship or the authority of an older voice, was betrayed by his own credulity. He accepted the lie. He turned back. He returned to the very city he had been commanded to avoid, and he partook of the bread and the water he had sworn not to touch. The purity of his mission, his flawless obedience, was fractured by a moment of misplaced trust in a word that contradicted the Eternal's first, clear instruction. Chapter 4. The Forbidden Feast and the Sentence. 1 Kings 13:20-25. The man of God sat at the old prophet's table, surrounded by the shadows of Bethel, eating the forbidden bread and drinking the forbidden water. The meal was not a gesture of fellowship, but the stage for judgment. The tension in the room was palpable, a spiritual weight that pressed down upon the table. Suddenly, the word of the Eternal arrived again, shattering the fragile peace. But this time, it was not spoken by the messenger from Judah. It came forth from the mouth of the old prophet, the very man who had engineered the betrayal. The instrument of the deception became, paradoxically, the unwitting vessel of divine truth. A terrible sentence was pronounced upon the deceived prophet. He was condemned not for facing the king, but for violating the strict rule of his consecration. He had broken the explicit command, preferring the comfort of the table and the false promise of a new revelation over the rigor of the original word. Because of this disobedience, the old prophet declared, the body of the man of God would not be brought to the sepulchre of his fathers. 1 Kings 13:22. His burial would be an outcast's end, a final, public sign of his failure. The meal concluded under the heavy shadow of this judgment. The man of God rose and prepared for the journey he should never have interrupted. He mounted his donkey and rode out once more, no longer a faithful herald, but a man under a final, irrevocable sentence. The road he took was the alternate path he had chosen before, but the intent of his heart was now changed from purity to guilt. He had not traveled far before the judgment was executed. Along the road he was met by a lion. The predator, often a symbol of sudden, irresistible force in the prophetic literature, was transformed into an agent of divine justice. The lion attacked the man and slew him. The life of the messenger, whose obedience had been so powerful at the altar, was cut short in the wilderness due to a subtle failure of discernment. The lion stood over the body, its purpose fulfilled. The donkey, carrying the now lifeless prophet, stood motionless nearby. This scene, the slain body, the standing lion, and the unmoving donkey, was discovered by passers-by. The sight was impossible, a disruption of the natural order that confirmed the unnatural divine origin of the death. The lion had not consumed the body. The donkey had not fled. The predatorial instinct had been suspended by a higher will. The judgment was complete, literal, and undeniable. Chapter 5. The Silent Testimony and the Burial. 1 Kings 13:26-32. The travelers who witnessed the surreal tableau spread the news. The reports of the dead man, the lion standing guard, and the silent donkey traveled back to Bethel. When the old prophet, the author of the deception, heard the full account, he understood instantly the meaning of the unnatural stillness. The death was not an accident. It was the final, crushing confirmation that the original mandate was indeed the only true word. It is the man of God, who was disobedient to the word of the Eternal. He lamented. He realized that the lion, by not devouring the body, had provided the final quiet sign that this was a judgment, not a mere act of nature. 1 Kings 13:26. The old prophet saddled his donkey and rode out to the spot. He found the scene precisely as described, the lion and the donkey keeping their vigil over the slain prophet. The old prophet then took up the body and, in a strange, mournful act of repentance and final reverence, brought it back to Bethel. The messenger who had been forbidden to share a meal within the city's walls was now brought back to its center for his final rest. The old prophet wept over him and mourned, calling the deceased man, "Alas, my brother." 1 Kings 13:30. He laid the body in his own sepulchre, providing the prophet from Judah with the very thing the divine sentence had seemingly denied, an honorable burial. Yet, the body was not returned to the land of his fathers, fulfilling the core of the judgment. In a final act that sealed his own tragic role in the story, the old prophet instructed his sons. He commanded them to bury his own body next to the man of God when his time came. This request was a recognition of the prophetic truth of the man he had deceived. He knew the prophecy of Josiah's coming, the future profanation of the altar, and the burning of the apostate priest's bones. By being buried next to the man of God, whose judgment came from the mouth of the Eternal, the old prophet hoped his own bones would be spared when Josiah came to execute the prophecy upon the sepulchres of Bethel. 1 Kings 13:32. The grave of the disobedient prophet became the only sanctuary the lying prophet could imagine. The enigma of this story lies in the terrifying severity of the judgment and the character of the old prophet. The man of God from Judah, who bravely confronted a king and saw his word instantly confirmed by miracle, was slain for a simple act of eating and drinking. His failure was not cowardice or malice, but a lack of discernment, a trusting of a secondary voice that contradicted the clear, established word. The severity teaches that obedience is not merely about great acts of courage, but about the absolute fidelity to the specific instructions given, particularly when they involve ritual separation. But the text offers a deeper shadow in the figure of the old prophet. Why did he lie, claiming a new angelic revelation? Was he testing the younger man, seeking to destroy his integrity out of envy? Or was he merely a man so accustomed to the compromised spiritual climate of Bethel that the strictness of the mandate felt like an unnecessary burden? The most chilling nuance is the fact that the Eternal used the deceiver to deliver the final word of judgment. The old prophet, a vessel of error, was made a temporary vessel of truth, confirming that even amidst human failure, the voice of the Eternal will find its way to speak, even if only to condemn. The narrative carefully avoids attributing the lie to God, firmly stating that the old prophet lied, while confirming that the judgment came from the Eternal. This distinction preserves the divine holiness against the backdrop of human darkness. The entire episode serves as a powerful, ancient warning. The sacred word once given is absolute, and any subsequent claim that nullifies it must be treated with the utmost suspicion. The story of the man of God from Judah stands as an essential pillar in the theology of prophetic faithfulness. It teaches that the spiritual life is not measured solely by spectacular acts of faith, but by the quiet, unyielding adherence to the clear, specific command. The failure was not in the beginning, which was brilliant in its courage, but in the middle, a yielding to the desire for fellowship and ease where separation was required. The scene of the lion, the donkey, and the slain prophet remains a cinematic image of divine rigor. The law of the natural world was suspended to confirm the law of the spiritual world. The lion did not act out of hunger, it acted out of mandate. The death was a profound, visible confirmation that the original word, the word of separation, was holy and unchangeable. This narrative, stripped of all dialogue and all dramatic flourish, becomes a contemplative meditation on authority. When the Eternal has spoken, no subsequent voice, be it royal, fraternal, or even seemingly angelic, can revoke the pure, original command. The man of God fell because he listened to a voice about the Eternal, rather than clinging to the sure word he had already received directly from the Eternal. His tragedy whispers a truth that echoes across all the ages. True grace is found not in the relaxation of the command, but in the strength to uphold it, even unto death. May grace whisper truth to your heart. Until our next chapter.